I added 10 custom dimensions to Minecraft, and here's why. This is a project I've been working on for a long time, and I'm really proud of the way that it's turned out. And I'll show you in a second, but besides looking really cool and being super awesome to play with, I had a very specific reason that I made these dimensions. But before we get into that, I'm going to quickly show you all of the dimensions so you can get a better understanding of what I have made. And while I'm showing off these dimensions, leave your guesses in the comments about what I made this for. Because at the end of the video, I'm going to talk about exactly why I made these dimensions and how I use them with my friends. And it is one of the best ideas I have ever had. Starting off with the first dimension, Alpha. I wanted this dimension to be reminiscent of the earliest versions of Minecraft. So I recolored things like the grass and the sky to make them more vibrant. This dimension is practically empty with just trees and mobs. Naturally generating animals in this dimension are pigs, cows, sheep, chicken, bees, and wolves. And naturally generating mobs are skeletons, zombies, creepers, and spiders. While this dimension doesn't come with caves, it does come with geodes, lava pools, and mob spawners. Now the second dimension is Desolation, and this dimension exists for one very specific reason, and it's because I learned that I can increase the world generation limit in order to generate terrain that is over 500 blocks tall. This world exists purely because I thought it would be awesome to make enormous mountains. This dimension generates with tons of ores, and it can also spawn bastions and desert temples. This dimension really is my favorite because it just looks so cool. Like I made it purely for how cool it would look, and it is. It's actually insane. Now the next dimension is Contrast. This dimension is kind of weird. This has kind of weird Sky Island generation with birch trees and emerald blocks. The main mob type here is the Breeze, but also the occasional Happy Ghast, which naturally spawn with saddles on. Also, at the bottom of this world, it is completely covered with ice. There are no ores in this dimension, but there are trial chambers. Now Dimension 4 is also one of my favorites. This is Civilization. Civilization is a flat world that generates an infinite village. The village actually stretches forever, with pillager outposts all over the place. This dimension's natural mobs are ghasts and ravagers. Now when I originally made this dimension, the natural mobs were pillagers and blazes because I wanted it to be an unbelievable firefight every time you enter this dimension, but with having so many blazes spawn, it became incredibly laggy almost immediately, so we switched to something still destructive but a little less overbearing. Now Dimension 5 is a simple dimension called Synthwave. Synthwave is almost completely empty save for a couple of mine shafts, and the natural mob is Enderman. There are no natural ores in this dimension, and there are no trees. I really just wanted to make this dimension as a way to show off some really cool generation, and also to have a place for Enderman to spawn. Now Dimension 6 is the Beginning, and this is one of my other favorites. It has similar generation to Synthwave, except there's large holes into the void, oceans, and coral that naturally generates in the water. The structures that generate here are shipwrecks and end cities, and the natural mob is silverfish. I wanted this dimension to be kind of a play on the end dimension because it has structures like the end, and it's kind of textured like the end, but it also has water, coral, and shipwrecks, which are things that you would not find in the end. Now Dimension 7 is the Nether? This dimension is obviously also a play on the Nether dimension, where instead of netherrack, fire, and burning, it is cool colors, sand, and water. Now this dimension is practically empty except for all the drowns that spawn in the water. Now technically no structures spawn in this dimension, but on the Nether roof there were a couple of accidents, so the bottom halves of igloos do spawn up here. I'm not really sure why this happened. I just couldn't get them to spawn in a normal location, so kind of at the top of the world there's the bottom halves of igloos. Now Dimension 8 might be one of the coolest. This is the Lost World. This dimension spawns with an almost endless ancient city that can be either floating above the void or sitting up on stone pillars above a weird bedrock texture. This dimension is so cool because of both the color palette and because of the structure itself. It is insane that it generates this way, and I don't even remember how I got it to work like this. Additionally, in this dimension, woodland mansions can also spawn. I don't know why they're so high up there. I couldn't get them to be anywhere else. I'm just happy they would spawn at all. This dimension has no natural mobs aside from things that are going to spawn in woodland mansions or in the ancient cities. And this dimension also generates regular overworld ores. Genuinely, this dimension is one of my favorites because it's really cool to see, but it's also really difficult to navigate. Now, Dimension 9 is the finale. This is a really cool world that generates only one island in the center of the world. The rest of the world is covered in lava oceans, and there's this really cool structure that always generates kind of in the sky above the middle of the island. This is one of my favorite dimensions just purely on how it's generated. It's generated in like quarter chunk pieces that are sticking out at weird angles, and the color palette is really interesting. This dimension has no ores, no mobs, and no regular structures. While it might be kind of confusing why I would make a dimension like this, in just a second I'll be explaining what these dimensions are for, and it will make a lot more sense. Because the last dimension is a custom end dimension. And let me tell you, this dimension is awesome. This is a custom end dimension that is at the end of my dimensions data pack. Above anything else, it just looks so cool. The generation of this world is actually insane. To have random splatters of grass around the dragon pillars is actually awesome. And now that we've made it to the last dimension, it is time to explain why I made these dimensions. Now, based on the custom end dimension, you might have been able to guess that this data pack is used for Minecraft Manhunt. The goal of this data pack is to speedrun the 9 custom dimensions in order to get to the custom end dimension and kill the dragon. This is one of my favorite projects that I've been working on, and it is so much fun to play. The way it works is instead of collecting Eyes of Ender, you're collecting custom discs for each dimension. Each dimension has a custom structure that spawns with half of a disc for that dimension. Collecting 2 pieces will give you the full disc for the dimension, and then you can move on to the next one. After collecting all 9 discs, you'll then be allowed to teleport to the custom end dimension. So, the reason I made these dimensions was to play Minecraft Manhunt so that I could try and speedrun these 9 dimensions while my friends tried to stop me from killing the Ender Dragon in the custom end dimension. Now, while this doesn't necessarily make the game harder, it makes it almost unrecognizably different. I made the data pack intentionally so that players would have to encounter unfamiliar terrains and work in difficult situations that they're not used to. I also intentionally included aspects of the game that normal manhunts would never encounter. Whether it's insane terrain generation or miles and miles of ice for ice boating, I wanted to give both the runners and the hunters the opportunity to make the most insane plays that they would never be able to do in regular Manhunt. Like I said, these dimensions are one of the coolest things I've ever made, and it has been so fun playing with friends and learning how these dimensions work in actual gameplay. And with that being said, I have multiple manhunts recorded with this data pack that I'll be releasing very soon, and I'm incredibly excited because they are so cool. So if you thought these dimensions were cool and you want to see them in action, or you want to get a closer look at how they actually work, be sure to stay tuned for that. Subscribe so that you'll know when these uploads are out, and you'll get to see these dimensions be used in actual manhunts. So that is all I've got for today. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you on the next one. Be sure to stop by the Discord so you can chat with everyone and ask some questions. Right, anyway, now I'll see you on the next one.